At the annual conference of Penguin Technology, I had intended to announce my relationship with the CEO's girlfriend in front of everyone. Her long-lost first love stood up from the audience and with pride said, "Grace, I can finally stand by your side openly." Grace, my girlfriend, gave no explanation. Instead, she smiled and embraced him, introducing him to everyone. "This is Oscar, who will be the chief scientist for our latest quantum computing project." The applause was thunderous and everyone was congratulating this perfect couple. Grace noticed my emotionless face and quickly gave me a subtle glance. "Bruno, don't look like that. Do you have an issue?" I gently nodded, then threw the chief scientist's badge into the trash can right on the spot. "Of course I have an issue. Since Professor Oscar is so outstanding, why don't we just hold the wedding today and make everyone happy?" Chapter 1. Everyone was stunned when they saw me throw away the badge. After all, over the years, I had poured my heart and soul into the quantum computing project, even to the point of developing serious health issues. But soon it seemed everyone understood what was going on and they all gave me thumbs up, calling me magnanimous. Only Grace Lee, standing on the stage, had a terrifyingly dark look in her eyes. In the face of her gaze, I couldn't be bothered to explain anymore. Grace despised office relationships. We had been married for 5 years and she never mentioned it to anyone. I had asked many times to make our relationship public, but she always said that as CEO, she had to set an example. She promised that once the quantum computer project succeeded, she would tell everyone, but now she had given everything to someone else. Seeing the admiration in everyone's eyes toward Oscar, Grace finally couldn't hold back and spoke. "Bruno, what are you making a fuss about this time?" I smiled faintly and replied, "I'd rather miss 1,000 opportunities than betray one person." I had given my all, but it couldn't compete with a single word from another. I said no more and turned to leave. This success in research was the result of sleepless nights and my full dedication. It was only through leveraging all my connections that we managed to break through the core issues of quantum computing in just 3 years. I had collapsed countless times in the lab, and all of it was for her glory today. Now my heart was as cold as ashes, and I had no intention of helping her or anyone else anymore. Though the project was nearing completion, even if I gave Oscar 5 more years with his theoretical armchair approach, he'd never be able to finish what was left. I walked to the underground parking lot and got on the small electric scooter that Grace, in her great generosity, had bought for me. I couldn't help but bitterly smile. For 5 years, the company's finances had been in her hands. I had asked countless times to buy a car, but she always refused. The company already provides a car. Why waste money? Are you trying to keep up with others? But for 5 years she had never let me ride in her car, citing the need to avoid suspicion. I had no complaints, thinking she was just being considerate of the company. But the day Oscar returned to the country, she immediately bought him a Porsche. And that's when I understood it was all because she didn't have me in her heart. My heart was dead. And just as I was about to leave, a brand new Porsche blocked my path. Oscar rolled down the window, his face filled with disdain. "Bruno, with your pathetic appearance, do you really think Grace will acknowledge you?" It's laughable. Luckily, it was me that Grace announced today. If it were you, the entire tech world would be laughing their heads off. He mocked me from his high horse. This was his usual tactic. Provoke me, then play the victim, trying to create a rift between Grace and me. In the past, most of our arguments had been instigated by him. Now I couldn't be bothered to engage. The next second, Grace rushed out, and Oscar immediately swerved the steering wheel, crashing the car into a nearby pillar. "Bruno, I'm sorry. I didn't see you here. I know you're upset that I overshadowed you, but you shouldn't have blocked my way. If anything happened, I'd feel guilty for life." He quickly got out of the car, pretending to apologize. I didn't want to waste time arguing, so I tried to leave on my scooter, but Grace kicked me to the ground. "If you want to die, stay far away and stop bothering Oscar." If she had just looked at the security footage, she would know who was lying, but she refused to look. In that moment, my heart turned to ash. Oscar pretended to help me up, but I impatiently pushed him away. He immediately feigned injury and fell to the ground. It was a pathetic performance, but unfortunately, some people were easily fooled. Grace immediately slapped me without hesitation, then lovingly embraced Oscar. She drove him to the hospital, running several red lights along the way. Watching this, I couldn't help but recall the time last year when I had bled from gastric ulcers after working day and night to secure project investments. She only had her assistant send me a bottle of medicine. I bitterly smiled and picked up my electric scooter to head home. That night, Oscar updated his social media. "Sometimes injury is a blessing. It's nice to have someone take care of you." The photo showed Grace feeding him, smiling warmly. I commented emotionlessly, wishing you both a lifetime of happiness." A moment later, Grace called me. I thought she would blame me for ruining the atmosphere, but instead she spoke softly. "Bruno, Oscar is just like that. Once he adjusts to the work environment, I'll make our relationship public. The title of chief scientist is just a formality. The project is still under your lead and you're still in charge behind the scenes." I gave a cold, indifferent mm. She had been playing this game for 5 years. Slap me once, then offer a sweet treat. I was tired of it now. Sensing my indifference, she paused for a moment before saying, "I've prepared a gift for you in the drawer. Consider it compensation. Please don't make a scene." I opened the drawer and found a beautifully wrapped gift box, clearly labeled for Oscar. So it was for someone else. No wonder she seemed so guilty. I didn't say anything more and hung up the phone. Too lazy to even open it. I threw the gift box into the trash. Then I took out my phone and called Mars Technology, a company that had been courting me. "I've made my decision. I'll join next month." Chapter 2. Mars Technology, as a global leader in quantum computing, had been throwing me olive branches for years. Each offer was better than the last, but I had never wavered because I wanted to stay by Grace's side. On the phone, they promised me the position of vice president of RD, along with stock options, a villa, a luxury car, and everything else. A chill ran through me. In 5 years of marriage, I had received less attention from Grace than I did from a stranger company. I remembered when she casually said she wanted to become the queen of technology, so I gave up a lifetime tenure at a prestigious foreign university and chose to start from scratch with her. Countless sleepless nights spent debugging code, countless times rushing to meetings for the project. I wore my body out. In the end, I single-handedly lifted Grace, who knew nothing about quantum computing, to the position of CEO. While I quietly stayed in the background as a technician, I gave her everything she wanted. But in the end, I had become someone else's stepping stone. From now on, I would live for myself. That night, I booked my flight and wrote my resignation letter. I also sent the final technical parameters and testing plans for the quantum computer to Grace. Now everything between her and me was settled. While packing my bags, I came across many dusty memories. Couple watches, custom coffee mugs, lab photos, a celebratory video from the first paper we published. These were all things Grace had collected little by little, but I didn't know when they had gathered dust. Probably since the day Oscar returned to the country, we used to stay up late writing code together, celebrating project breakthroughs. She used to take care of me when I was sick, and we swore to change the world together. But then came the nights she didn't come home and Oscar's academic discussions. Even when I was hospitalized due to overwork, she never came to visit. It turned out that true love could expire. I once asked her why, but all I got in return was her disdain and impatience. "We've been together so long and you still don't get it. Oscar is a top expert in the field. Of course he should get more resources. Can't you grow up?" Looking at the photo in my hand, I suddenly felt ridiculous and tossed it into the trash. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Grace. "I have to accompany Oscar to an academic conference tonight. We'll celebrate our anniversary another time." I didn't reply, silently canceling the reservation for the Michelin restaurant and the custom projection confession. In the past, she would just cancel on me without notice, but this time at least she told me in advance. Or I scrolled through videos and the top trending topic was female CEO and scientist stroll under the moon with a picture of Grace walking hand in hand with Oscar on campus. The comments were full of well wishes and I absent-mindedly gave it a like. After a shower, I went to a bar to relax and also to meet with a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. When I came home in the early morning, I saw Grace standing at the door with a dark expression. "So now you're learning to stay out all night." Chapter 3. I yawned a bit surprised. She didn't spend the night out in the past. Whenever it involved an academic event with Oscar, she would never leave his side, almost as if she needed to be with him 24/7. I ignored her and walked toward the bedroom, but she grabbed my arm. "After all these years of marriage, now you're learning to go to bars. I specifically canceled the seminar to come back and be with you. And this is how you treat me. Bruno, do you even remember you're a husband?" A husband? Grace could lie without batting an eye. And now she was talking to me about responsibility. It was our wedding anniversary and she was walking around campus with another man. Yet she had the nerve to question my lack of responsibility. In the past, I used to stay up waiting for her to come home, but she would say I was too clingy and not independent enough, telling me to focus on the project instead. Now, when I stopped caring, she started getting obsessive. I half-heartedly responded, preparing to go to bed, but she forcefully pulled me up and stared at me coldly. "I haven't taken a shower yet. You're going to stay with me." In the past, this request would have made me ecstatic. I would have carefully prepared the water at the perfect temperature and added her favorite essential oils. But now I only found it ridiculous. Noticing the faint red marks on her neck, I felt disgusted and impatiently pushed her away. I've already showered. You can go by yourself. She looked at me in disbelief. It's just a little while on our anniversary. I told you the seminar ran late. How can you be so inconsiderate? You went out drinking. Did I say anything? Why are you giving me this attitude? She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the past, I would have chased after her, apologized, and tried to cheer her up. Now I just climbed into bed and slept soundly. The next morning I slept until I naturally woke up and made myself a delicious breakfast just as I was about to eat. I realized Grace was home. In the past, she would never come back unless I apologized first. Reluctantly, I pushed the breakfast toward her and her expression softened a bit. I noticed the lab access card lying on the table and froze. This was the highest level access card, able to enter all experimental areas. I had applied for it multiple times but had always been rejected. Seeing my reaction, Grace awkwardly explained, "This is a birthday gift for Oscar. We'll talk about yours later." I felt like I had just fallen into an ice pit and laughed bitterly. Of course she wouldn't think about me. I forced a smile, nodded, and handed her 2 documents. "Sign these." She impatiently took them. "You think just because I'm being nice you can take advantage of me?" The first resignation letter she signed without even looking up, though I had expected this. My heart still ached for the second document, the divorce agreement. She signed it as well but then realized something was wrong. Grace's expression changed dramatically as she threw the divorce agreement at me. "Bruno, you think you can threaten me with divorce? You think I won't sign it? Fine, I'll sign it for you. Is that what you wanted?" Chapter 4. I calmly said, "Thank you." Seeing my indifference, Grace became even more furious. "I'm giving you one last chance. Rip up the divorce agreement and I'll pretend nothing ever happened." I ignored her and quietly put the agreement away. Grace trembled with anger. "Fine, Bruno, you've got guts. Don't come crawling back in a few days begging me to reconsider." With that, she slammed the door and left. She was sure I would chase after her like I always had before to make amends, but this time she was wrong. I shrugged and rode my e-bike to the lab to collect my personal belongings. As I arrived downstairs, I saw the research building surrounded by reporters and crowds. After asking around, I learned that Oscar, in an attempt to rush a paper for publication, had skipped the final safety tests and launched the quantum computer. As a result, several financial institutions' data systems crashed, causing massive losses. It seemed they never bothered to read the testing plan I sent. This was the result of their own reckless actions, but it was no longer my concern. Oscar, surrounded by the reporters, saw me and immediately shouted. He's the main person responsible for the project. The data security incident is his fault. I turned to leave but Oscar blocked my way, running away after causing a mess. It's not going to be that easy. "Bruno, do you even care about the clients who trusted our technology?" His words were full of righteous indignation and the crowd around us was getting stirred up. "People like this fraud should be jailed. Compensate us if you don't give us an explanation today. Don't even think about leaving." Grace stood next to him but she didn't even acknowledge my predicament. At that moment, I was utterly disillusioned. I looked at Oscar and pulled out the press conference video. At the press conference, Chairman Lee specifically said that you, Professor Oscar, were the chief scientist. Now that something went wrong, you're trying to shift the blame onto an ordinary employee. Do you think we, the workers, are just scapegoats? This immediately ignited the anger of the researchers around us. Exactly. It was clearly stated that Professor Oscar was in charge. Now that something went wrong, they want to pin it on us. Are we researchers just pushovers? In the heat of the moment, some people started digging up evidence online and even someone called the police. Grace panicked and quickly tried to explain. "Everyone, please calm down. We will give you an explanation." She then turned to me. "Bruno, did you sabotage the system in the final stages because of jealousy? Could you really do something like this?" I smiled but didn't speak. She became even more agitated. "You need to fix the system right now or I'll fire you." I shrugged. "Why should I?" Grace stood her ground. "Because you're an employee of the company and it's your responsibility. You've been part of the whole project. You have an obligation." I smiled and shook my head, tossing the resignation letter she had signed in front of her. "Sorry, I'm no longer an employee of your company." Chapter 5. Grace stared at me in shock. "Impossible. When did I ever approve your resignation? Without my permission? How dare you resign on your own?" I sneered. She was always like this, used to giving orders, taking it for granted that I would revolve around her forever. After 5 years of marriage, she had never treated me as an equal partner. I had given up everything for her technological dreams, working tirelessly for 8 years, silently solving all technical problems behind her. The reason was simple. I loved her, but I had forgotten that one-sided sacrifice only leads the other person to take more and more. And in the end, she casually handed over all my years of effort to someone else. Now I no longer loved her. She no longer had the power to make me bow down, so her threats now seemed so ridiculous. Grace, hysterical, shouted. "Who gave you permission to resign?" Oscar rushed over immediately, ripping up the still unopened resignation letter into pieces. "Grace, a core technical person like him needs your personal approval to resign since you had no idea this resignation must be forged. You vile person. You think you can escape responsibility with these dirty tricks? Bruno, you're so naive." I wasn't fazed. I took out another resignation letter from my bag. "Tear it up if you want. I have plenty more. If you get tired of tearing them, I'll happily tear them with you. Also, I don't deserve the title of core technical person. The real core person is you. You managed to become the chief scientist without even understanding anything. Your skills must be impressive. If that's the case, why don't you fix the system yourself? A return PhD can't even understand basic quantum entanglement. Can you?" Oscar's face turned dark, obviously stung by my words. Grace, seeing her so-called genius being humiliated by me, couldn't hold back her fury and charged at me. "Shut up. RD. Was always your responsibility. Now you're making sarcastic remarks. Do you know how hard Oscar worked to clean up your mess? Apologize to him immediately and go fix the system." I sneered. It was no surprise she was so eager to protect him. Looking at the 5 years we had been married, every time the project hit a bottleneck and people questioned it, not only did she never speak up for me, but she also publicly criticized my abilities. Yet I naively thought she was motivating me. Seeing me remain silent, Grace took another step closer. "What are you waiting for? Go fix the system." I calmly showed her the resignation letter I had signed. "Chairman Lee, you might want to take a good look. This is your signature from this morning." Chairman Lee is a busy person, so it's understandable that he forgets small matters like this. After all, I'm just an insignificant nobody, hardly worth remembering. Grace's face turned pale as she stared at the signature in disbelief. This can't be Chapter 6. Her words hung in the air as she grabbed the resignation letter from my hands and began to examine it carefully. I sneered. "What's wrong, Chairman Lee? Want to rip it up too? Go ahead. I've got the original. I can print as many copies as you want." Only then did Grace have to face reality. I had no further ties with this cold-blooded laboratory. "Bruno, the resignation letter you made me sign this morning was for your resignation. How has the lab wronged you? How have I wronged you? You're repaying kindness with betrayal like this." I was stunned by her shamelessness. She had the nerve to ask how she had wronged me. I was the one who built this quantum laboratory from scratch, and yet she handed over the highest level permissions and core projects to her genius professor, refusing to give me even the most basic experimental rights. How could she ask me where she had wronged me? I remembered questioning her when she made that decision. She said the lab was our joint effort, our mutual asset, and it wouldn't matter whose hands it was in. But she never once considered whether, as joint partners, it was necessary to consult me on such decisions. She never did. Grace had never considered me as her equal to her. I had always been the subservient one, repaying kindness with betrayal. How much have I sacrificed for this lab? Do you even know? Even if you're too busy to care about someone like me, just ask anyone in the lab. Anyone. Even the cleaning lady. Ask them what I've given. I've sacrificed my health. And what did you give me in return? At the press conference, in front of everyone, you handed over 8 years of my hard work to someone else. Grace panicked. I didn't do that. Oscar is a top-tier expert. How is it better for the lab if he leads the project? Why can't you just be magnanimous? I raised my hands in mock surrender. I'm not magnanimous enough. Didn't I just step aside and give your genius professor a place? What? Still not satisfied? Grace shook with rage. You're making excuses. Since it was your project, you should see it through to the end. I laughed scornfully. Professor Oscar, isn't he a returned PhD with extensive knowledge? Can't he even fix this minor system glitch? I'm giving him the opportunity to show off his talents, and now he's blaming me. Oscar's face turned red and the people around us began whispering. Colleagues shot him disdainful looks and some even began to quietly mock him. His fragile pride couldn't take it. He quickly adopted a pitiful expression and said to Grace, "Grace, it's okay if Bruno doesn't want to. I can handle it." Grace looked at him with sympathy. Oscar, I know you're capable, but this is Bruno's responsibility. Why should you bear the burden? She then turned to me, her voice icy. Bruno, I'm giving you one last chance. Fix the system or leave. Or else. At this point, she hesitated. I didn't care and asked, or else what? Grace took a deep breath. Or else. I'll divorce you. Chapter 7. With her words. Everyone in the room was stunned. What? Chairman Lee and Bruno are married. Oh my God, I had no idea after all these years. This is shocking. It was laughable. After 5 years of marriage, no one had known until the moment of divorce. I always wondered why Bruno always kept quiet. Turns out it's because of this. If I were him, I wouldn't have tolerated it either. My wife giving my hard work to some young pretty boy. Exactly. Working overtime on experiments only for someone else to take all the credit. Who could stand that this lab is a joke? I don't want to work here anymore. While the crowd was shocked, their emotions were also growing increasingly agitated. Many of the old employees had worked their way up alongside me and were already dissatisfied with Grace's behavior. Now that they knew our relationship, their anger was only intensified, and many researchers immediately tendered their resignations. But Grace clearly didn't care about that anymore. She took a step toward me. Bruno, this is your last chance. Don't say I didn't warn you. I gave her a mocking smile. Chairman Lee, did you forget something? You already signed the divorce agreement this morning. Now you're using divorce to threaten me. Doesn't that seem a bit ridiculous? Grace's face turned pale. Bruno, don't push your luck. I'll pretend this morning never happened. If you go fix the system now, we're still married. As soon as she said that, the colleagues around us couldn't hold back anymore. Bruno, don't be foolish. A woman like that isn't worth it. Grace immediately pointed at the researcher who spoke. You won't be coming to work tomorrow. The researcher sneered. If it weren't for Bruno secretly giving us bonuses and bringing us onto projects, I would have left a long time ago, working myself to the bone for just over $10,000 a month. And I have to put up with your attitude. Pitch. D, who doesn't even understand quantum entanglement, is telling us what to do. I've had enough. As soon as he finished, other researchers also began handing in their resignations, including several key technical members. Grace was stunned, and it took her a while to snap back to reality, panic creeping into her voice. Anyone who resigns won't get a single penny in compensation. At those words, the crowd burst into laughter. What difference does it make whether you pay us or not? Grace became even angrier. If you all resign now, you'll be held responsible for the system failure. At this, the anger of the crowd reached its peak. Responsible. Let me tell you. The last bit of debugging work could have been done by anyone here, but someone had to act all high and mighty. With that, everyone turned their gaze toward Oscar. He insisted everything had to go according to his plan. Yet he skipped even the most basic safety tests. And now he wants to blame us. I'll sue you in court if you keep talking like that. Exactly. Bruno's plan was solid, but he changed it all just to rush out a paper, skipping essential procedures. Now something's gone wrong and he wants to pin the blame on us. Do you really think we're pushovers? One by one, people started pulling out evidence, exposing it right then and there. Seeing this, the client representatives who had been watching from the sidelines finally understood the truth. They apologized to me and immediately picked up their phones to call the police. Seeing this unfold, Oscar tried to escape but was quickly surrounded by the crowd. Chapter 8. Is this how you're leaving? How irresponsible. Professor Oscar, you dare to alter the plan without even understanding the most basic quantum error correction. Is this your academic level? Surrounded by the crowd, Oscar could no longer pretend, and he hurriedly sought help from Grace. Seeing things taking a turn for the worse, Grace quickly stood in front of him. Everyone calm down. We'll give you all an explanation. She then turned to me, her gaze sharp. Bruno, you must have sabotaged the system in the final stage. Just out of jealousy for Oscar, you're doing this just to hurt him. I smiled but said nothing. She became even more agitated. You need to go fix the system right now or else I will never let you off the hook. I shrugged. Why should I? Grace responded confidently. Because you were involved in the entire project development. This is your responsibility. I shook my head with a smile and tossed all the documents she had signed in front of her. Sorry, I'm no longer part of the lab and I'm certainly not your husband anymore. Grace was stunned, grabbing the documents in a frenzy. Bruno, you're doing this out of revenge. I turned and walked away, but this time she couldn't stop me as the police had already arrived. After cooperating with the police, giving my statement and providing evidence to prove my innocence, I was soon released from the police station. Even though Grace tried every possible way to stop me, it didn't change anything. As per the divorce agreement, I legally claimed half of the lab's assets. The remaining portion, Grace had to sell off to compensate the victims. In the end, everything settled down. Grace tried to pin all the blame on Oscar, thinking that would save her from the consequences. But the law is equal for everyone. Oscar turned on her, and in the end, Grace couldn't escape the consequences. In the final moments when the police took her away, she was still desperately pleading. "Bruno, I really love you. Please save me. I don't want to be apart from you." Sadly, I had grown tired of hearing such lies. I left her with only 4 words. Never again. Never again. That was the best closure I could give to everything I had given. Chapter 9. In the interview room at Mars Technology, I was presenting my research achievements. "Mr. Bruno, your resume is impressive, but we've received some less than ideal news." The interviewer hesitated. I knew exactly what was coming. Sure enough, the door to the meeting room opened the next second. "Wait," Grace's legal team barged in. "This Mr. Bruno is suspected of leaking trade secrets, and we have already filed a lawsuit against him." I gave a small laugh and pulled out a stack of documents from my bag. "Please take a look at these patent certificates. All of them are under my name. As for the other core technologies, they're listed in this resignation handover checklist, each one confirmed by Chairman Lee's signature." The lawyers flipped through the documents, their faces growing increasingly grim. "This can't be," Chairman Lee said. I interrupted him. Chairman Lee said, "Well, we have to thank her then. After all, these signatures were all personally signed by her this morning." The interviewers exchanged glances, and the skepticism in their eyes turned to admiration. After the interview, I unexpectedly ran into someone in the break room. "Bruno, is that really you?" Looking up, I saw Daniela, my former university classmate, now the head of the Quantum Communications Department at Mars Technology. "It's been a long time." I nodded politely. She enthusiastically pulled me into a conversation. "I heard you're joining our department." "That's great. I've been following your research, your paper on quantum entangled states." I kept my distance politely and responded briefly. The past hurt had made me wary of any close relationships. Soon after starting at the company, I was assigned to a project competing against my old lab. Grace with Oscar came for a technical exchange that was actually just a show of force. "Bruno, don't think that just because you've left the lab you're going to succeed. We've been working on this project for a long time," Oscar said smugly. I couldn't be bothered, so I turned and walked away. "What's wrong? Afraid to take on the challenge?" Grace called from behind. I didn't look back. "Let's wait for the results." 3 months later, our technical proposal completely crushed theirs in the evaluation. Watching Grace's sour expression on the news, I felt no sense of satisfaction. Just then, Daniela came over with a cup of coffee. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." I turned off the news. She gave me a thoughtful look. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" I looked at her, confused. "You never care about other people's opinions. You're always focused on the research itself. That's what a true scientist is." Her words left me stunned. Yes, that's what I had been striving for all along. The true essence of research, not the Hall of Fame. Gradually, I rediscovered my original passion. I spent every day in the lab discussing problems with Daniela and the team, completely immersed in the pure world of science. Finally, in one experiment we made a breakthrough. "Bruno, we did it!" My assistant shouted excitedly. Looking at the stable data on the screen, I smiled, a smile I hadn't worn in a long time. At that moment, I realized that what truly heals you is not the obsession with the past, but the hope for the future. Daniela brought me a cup of coffee. "This breakthrough is worth celebrating." I took the coffee from her, and for the first time, I didn't find the new environment so hard to accept. Chapter 10. Next we have Dr. Lisa from MIT, who will share with us the latest applications of quantum computing in the financial sector at the International Quantum Computing Conference. I was listening half-heartedly to the host's introduction, but then a clear and bright voice rang out, making me look up. Traditional financial risk control models have significant flaws, and the parallelism of quantum computing can perfectly solve this problem. The woman on stage was not wearing any makeup, but she radiated an intellectual aura. What captivated me most was the spark in her eyes when she spoke about the technical details. It was pure academic passion, free from any utilitarian motives. During the QA session, I couldn't help but raise my hand. "Dr. Lisa, you mentioned the quantum annealing algorithm. Does it have any issues with collapse when processing high-dimensional data?" Her eyes lit up. "This gentleman has asked a very professional question. In fact, we've already found a solution." After the session, she approached me on her own. "Dr. Bruno, I've read your paper and your insights into quantum entanglement are unique. I was somewhat surprised. I hadn't published much in recent years. She seemed to sense my confusion. It was one of your papers from university. I've been following your work ever since. The pure academic exchange made me relax unconsciously. In the following days of the conference, we often gathered to discuss issues ranging from quantum computing to the philosophy of physics. She never mentioned anything about my past, as though she was only interested in my views on research. It wasn't until she told me she was returning to her home country that I realized I had started to subconsciously look forward to our conversations. This feeling was dangerously unfamiliar. Bruno, I'm heading back home. Before she left, she invited me for coffee. Good luck on your journey, I replied, pretending to be calm. She smiled. Do you know what I admire most about you? Your talent? I joked. No, she said. Seriously, it's your sincerity. Despite everything you've been through, your love for research has never changed. That kind of purity is rare. I was stunned. It seemed she knew everything. You investigated me? I asked. No, she replied softly. It's just that the academic circle is small. Then she added, but I prefer to trust my own judgment. Her words touched something deep within me. 2 months later, she returned to work in her home country. Our relationship blossomed naturally with no forced effort. I like the way you focus, she said. And I like your honesty. Even knowing my past, your past shaped who you are today, she said, looking at me earnestly, and I only care about the person you are now. At that moment, I suddenly understood. True healing doesn't come from forgetting the pain, but from meeting someone who understands you. She didn't need me to be perfect, nor did she care about my past. She simply stood by my side quietly, making me believe again that pure feelings truly exist in this world. Turns out, letting go of the past is that simple. You only need to meet someone who makes you willing to start over.